Руководитель хозяйства может делать это в любой точке мира. Пользователю достаточно вбить кадастровый номер земельного участка. После оформления подписки эксперты скачивают снимки каждые 5 дней, проводят анализ объема биомассы, уровня влажности почвы и других показателей. Затем данные публикуются в кабинете пользователя. Предприятие EXPO работает на рынке уже 2 года. За это время платформа получила признание бизнеса. Компания приобрела надежных партнеров в лице таких крупных брендов, как Билайн и Алем Агро. Кроме того, выход на российский рынок был осуществлен в сотрудничестве с компанией Уралхим. Сегодня EXPO – это инвестиционно привлекательная международная компания, зарегистрированная в МФЦА.
The world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries, because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
На протяжении десятилетий фермеры управляли хозяйством, собирая и записывая данные вручную. Они пешком, либо на транспорте совершали обход территорий, затрачивая много времени и ресурсов. Сегодня для роста продуктивности и эффективного управления производственными затратами фермерам необходимо больше информации о своих культурах, чем когда-либо. Проект EXPO позволяет оптимизировать расходы и проводить сельхозмероприятия оперативно и эффективно. Руководитель хозяйства может делать это в любой точке мира. Пользователю достаточно вбить кадастровый номер земельного участка. После оформления подписки эксперты скачивают снимки каждые 5 дней, проводят анализ объема биомассы, уровня влажности почвы и других показателей. Затем данные публикуются в кабинете пользователя. Предприятие EXPO работает на рынке уже 2 года. За это время платформа получила признание бизнеса. Компания приобрела надежных партнеров в лице таких крупных брендов, как Билайн и Алем Агро. Кроме того, выход на российский рынок был осуществлен в сотрудничестве с компанией Уралхим. Сегодня EXPO – это инвестиционно привлекательная международная компания, зарегистрированная в МФЦА.
The world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
На протяжении десятилетий фермеры управляли хозяйством, собирая и записывая данные вручную. Они пешком, либо на транспорте совершали обход территорий, затрачивая много времени и ресурсов. Сегодня для роста продуктивности и эффективного управления производственными затратами фермерам необходимо больше информации о своих культурах, чем когда-либо. Проект EXPO позволяет оптимизировать расходы и проводить сельхозмероприятия оперативно и эффективно. Руководитель хозяйства может делать это в любой точке мира. Пользователю достаточно вбить кадастровый номер земельного участка. После оформления подписки эксперты скачивают снимки каждые 5 дней, проводят анализ объема биомассы, уровня влажности почвы и других показателей. Затем данные публикуются в кабинете пользователя. Предприятие EXTEC работает на рынке уже 2 года. За это время платформа получила признание бизнеса. Компания приобрела надежных партнеров в лице таких крупных брендов, как Beeline и Alem Agro. Кроме того, выход на российский рынок был осуществлен в сотрудничестве с компанией Уралхим. Сегодня EXTEC – это инвестиционно привлекательная международная компания, зарегистрированная в МФЦА.
The world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
На протяжении десятилетий фермеры управляли хозяйством, собирая и записывая данные вручную. Они пешком, либо на транспорте совершали обход территорий, затрачивая много времени и ресурсов. Сегодня для роста продуктивности и эффективного управления производственными затратами фермерам необходимо больше информации о своих культурах, чем когда-либо. Проект EXTEC позволяет оптимизировать расходы и проводить сельхозмероприятия оперативно и эффективно. Руководитель хозяйства может делать это в любой точке мира. Пользователю достаточно вбить кадастровый номер земельного участка. После оформления подписки эксперты скачивают снимки каждые 5 дней, проводят анализ объема биомассы, уровня влажности почвы и других показателей. Затем данные публикуются в кабинете пользователя. Предприятие EXPO работает на рынке уже 2 года. За это время платформа получила признание бизнеса. Компания приобрела надежных партнеров в лице таких крупных брендов, как Билайн и Алем Агро. Кроме того, выход на российский рынок был осуществлен в сотрудничестве с компанией Уралхим. Сегодня EXPO – это инвестиционно привлекательная международная компания, зарегистрированная в МФЦА.
Button, when it becomes red, basically you are talking.
Camera.
The world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
The world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
The world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
The world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
The world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
The world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
The world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
The world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
The world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
The world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
The world is full of unknown.
But we are those who expand the limits of knowledge. And this is what we call the explorer's ambition. It is in the nomad spirit we inherited from our forefathers that drives us forward.
We are curious about everything, regardless of any difficulties. We want to know things that do not even exist yet.
We see no boundaries because we can reach things that are thousands of light years away from us. Ahead of us awaits amazing knowledge about the world and its nature. Are there any limits to what we can do? It's worth the shot to find out.
Obstacles, time, distance.
This is part of the journey that matters.
Okay. Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the panel discussion dedicated to artificial intelligence education. This event is organized by Nazarbayev University and is held offline here at the National Pavilion of the Republic of Kazakhstan at the EXPO 2020 Dubai. So we would like to thank Kazakhstan Congress for this opportunity. We are also live streaming this event in Zoom, on YouTube and Facebook. So I would like to welcome our online participants as well. There are more than 400 participants watching us live now, representing 25 countries, such as the US, UK, UAE, Turkey, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Hong Kong, Nigeria, countries of Central Asia, and many others. So thank you for joining us today, and we are very excited to hear your questions during the Q&A session. Today we have several speakers representing educational institutions as well as business operating in different countries, including the United Arab Emirates. And I would like to thank our respected speakers for being able to join us today. And before we start the first presentation by our keynote speaker, I would like to give the floor to the Nazarbayev University Provost, Dr. Ilisanmi Adesida, for welcoming remarks. Please welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Dear distinguished guests, dear colleagues, dear friends, whether you are all in the hall here or online listening from around the world, good afternoon to you all and welcome to the panel session on artificial intelligence education. Kailen kun Shenier Koshkardinista. The panel session is being hosted by Nazarbayev University in the Kazakhstan Pavilion at the Dubai EXPO 2020. The defining theme of the impressive exhibition that has been masterfully displayed at the Kazakhstan Pavilion is artificial intelligence and its impact on the world of tomorrow. We sincerely thank the officers of the Kazakh EXPO Congress for inviting Nazarbayev University to participate in the discussion of this theme, specifically on how to train the future AI workforce for research and innovation. Before I go any further, let me introduce Nazarbayev University to you, whether you are here or online, if you don't already know us. It is an institution of higher education, serenely, and I say serenely, located in Nur-Sultan city, the capital city of the Republic of Kazakhstan, in the heart of Central Asia, along the ancient and historical Silk Road. The institution was created in 2010 by the first president of Kazakhstan, Elbasi Nursultan Nazarbayev, with the foresight and ambition that it would develop into a globally recognized international research university that trains leaders for Kazakhstan, the region, and the world as a whole. A special law brought it into existence as an autonomous organization of education with institutional autonomy and academic freedom enshrined in its charter. Part of the mission of NU, as we call Nazarbayev University, is to be a model for higher education reform and modern research, to contribute to the development of Nur-Sultan city as an international knowledge, innovation, and medical hub, and to prepare students for a world of increased volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That is the so-called VUCA world. When one examines the havoc that the COVID pandemic has wreaked, we are indeed living in a VUCA world. Specifically, Nazarbayev University has 5 mandates. That's a compact with the country. Higher education reform leadership, that's number 1. Academic excellence, research excellence. Those 2 you can get from any, that's the focus of any university, wants to be a university thoroughly. The next is a model for creating integrated healthcare services, which others can model in the Republic of Kazakhstan. And the last compact for us is innovation and translation of research into production. Currently, NU has over 6,800 students, over 500 professors and instructors, and over 1,000 staff members. The rapid development of the university has been aided by strong strategic partnerships with many leading universities, which include University of Pennsylvania, University of Wisconsin at Madison, Cambridge University, Duke University, University of Pittsburgh Medical School and Medical Center, National University of Singapore, Colorado School of Mines, and the University College London. Our partners have assisted us in developing our various schools. I'll name them: School of Sciences and Humanities, School of Mining and Geosciences, School of Engineering and Digital Sciences, School of Medicine, Graduate School of Education, Graduate School of Public Policy, and the Center for Preparatory Studies. With these schools working together in our drive for academic excellence, we have graduated over 6,000 students, and I see some of them in the crowd here today, and in bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in various disciplines. Most of our alumni are gainfully employed in Kazakhstan, while others are pursuing studies with scholarships at top institutions such as Stanford, Oxford, KAIST in Korea, National University of Singapore, ETH in Germany, in Switzerland, and other such universities. This inherent excellence has afforded NU's membership in the prestigious Asian University Alliance. This is a group that brings together 15 research-intensive flagship universities together to share experiences and to collaborate broadly. Among these universities are the University of Tokyo, Seoul National University in Korea, United Arab Emirates University here locally, IIT Bombay, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, University of Colombo, and Tsinghua University in China. In terms of research excellence, one of the 5 thrust areas of Nazarbayev University is smart systems and artificial intelligence. 2 years ago, we established the Institute of Smart Systems and Artificial Intelligence to intensify our research in this area. We call that institute ISAI shortly, in short form. You see the logo on the screen. ISAI conducts sophisticated research and also, even more importantly, works on projects with significant socio-economic impact in the Republic of Kazakhstan. These projects are such as COVID pandemic modeling for the Kazakhstan Ministry of Health and the cargo transportation modeling for the Ministry of Finance. In our push in the research sphere, plans are underway to establish an NU campus in Almaty with a focus on education and its applications. All these efforts are directed to producing the workforce that will drive and accelerate the Kazakhstan 2050 strategy of becoming a knowledge economy. It is evident from this foregoing that Nazarbayev University has the basis of organizing today's panel session on artificial intelligence. Exactly, details of the topic is how to train the future of AI workforce for research and innovation, which you see on the screen. a distinguished panel of AI experts and academics will seek to unravel the question of what kind of AI skills are most in demand to be successful in the job market of today and of tomorrow, to discuss ways of staying competitive and share the latest trends in inspirational success stories in the field of AI. For this afternoon's proceeding, Professor Atakan Varol, the head of Robotics, Department of Robotics, and the founding director of ESI at NU, will give the keynote talk on research at ESI. This will be followed by panel discussion, which will be moderated by Professor Vassilios Tourasis, the Vice Provost of Industry Engagement and the Dean of the School of Engineering and Digital Sciences at NU. The distinguished panel members are Professor Taib Znati, Dean of the College of Information Technology, United Arab Emirates University, which is our partner in the AUA. Welcome. Second speaker, the second panel member will be Dr. Shadab Han, Director of AI and Applied Sciences, G42 Healthcare, Abu Dhabi. Welcome. The third is one of us, Mr. Artur Saidabayev, the co-founder and the Chief Technology Officer of Causally Incorporated. The company is located in England, in London, England. Welcome. Welcome home. Okay. The fourth member is Mr. Bojan Albakr, Director of Data Analytics and Machine Learning, Jusan Bank, which is, I think, the second largest bank in Kazakhstan. It's also one of our own. And the last is Professor Atakan Varol, whom I've introduced. You may notice a defect in the composition of our speakers. I wonder who notices that. No girls. Okay. Although this part include women, we want to stress that. Okay. It was just a matter of timing. Okay. We couldn't get the people that we wanted. But one other thing I can tell you for sure is that NU, Nazarbayev University, and ESI actually have a higher proportion of our students and researchers. They are women. Okay. I think we have more women on campus in every school, actually, not just as globally, but every school. We have women as students and research. They are more than the men. NU work, what I want to stress is that NU welcomes talents, women, men, local and international. So for that, I say thank you for attending and participating in this event today, whether you're online or offline. And one thing I like to say before I leave the stage, also I wish to congratulate the citizens and residents of the Republic of Kazakhstan on the 30th anniversary of the independence of the nation. Could take time on. Professor Varol will now give this keynote address. Let me introduce him. Professor Varol received his PhD in electrical engineering at Vanderbilt University in the United States. He's widely published in the fields of robotics and AI, and I can say for sure that he has mentored many numerous students and staff during his 10 years of being a faculty member at NU. So now I give the floor to you, Atakan. Thank you.
Provost Ade, thank you very much for the great introduction. It is certainly a nice thing to see all of you here in person in an offline meeting. As professors, we like to lecture and see our audience and students in front of us. So today I will be talking about ESI, an artificial intelligence institute in Kazakhstan. We will have a look at its vision and a glimpse to its research because I only need to talk for 30 minutes today. So I am Atakan Varol, the founding director of ESI, and one of the founding faculty members of Nazarbayev University. So let's start with some quick facts about Kazakhstan, because here our audience might have seen the Kazakhstani Pavilion or might have visited Kazakhstan, but we have lots of international members of our audience in the online session. So Kazakhstan is located at the heart of Eurasia. It's a bridge between Asia and Europe, and the population of the country is 19 million. It is the 9th largest country, and it is independent since 1991. It has celebrated its 550th anniversary of Kazakh Khanate, and it ranks in the number 25th rank in the Ease of Doing Business Index, according to the World Bank. Thanks to its stability, it has received more than $330 billion of foreign direct investment since 1991. And the city of Turkestan is the spiritual capital of the Turkic world. So, in Kazakhstan, we are coming from Nur-Sultan city, the capital of Kazakhstan since 1997. It is also filled with architectural wonders, similar to Dubai. It's a very nicely planned city, filled with lots of parks and botanical gardens. In addition to this, it is a city where you can walk the streets and you see lots of modern sculptures and also lots of iconic symbolic sculptures from Kazakhstan, which just shows you the culture of the country. Moreover, the city is filled with cultural events. You can just have lots of performances every week in Astana Opera or Astana Ballet Theater, or at the same time in the Astana Philharmonic. And it is actually a cold place in contrast to Dubai. So this is the Ishim River, frozen in the winter, where you can just have a hike or do ice skating. You should all visit Kazakhstan once during the winter to enjoy this. But today, my objective is not to convince you that you should visit Nur-Sultan city after EXPO, which you should. But my objective is to talk about Nazarbayev University. I have been there for 10 years. We have literally built it brick by brick, and we can write many books about the story of this university. It has emerged as a quite good research university, training excellent students who either innovate either globally in London, Berlin, or San Francisco, or in Kazakhstan at Astana Hub or NU Technopark, or continue their educations at top-notch institutes and universities which Provost Ade have mentioned, or they just do great things in all companies around the world. But with respect to Nazarbayev University, one recent chapter is Institute of Smart Systems and Artificial Intelligence, which is an example of visionary leadership, because in September 2019, the first president of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev, instructed us to establish this research center. And we established ISAI to develop a national capacity for research in AI on the basis of Nazarbayev University, as a leading AI institute in Kazakhstan, to conduct cutting-edge research applicable not only for Kazakhstan but for the whole world, incorporating the experience of exemplars from Asia, Europe, and United States, to provide an agile framework for research and collaboration, and following the highest standards of integrity, taking the motto AI for good to heart. When we were founding this institute, we leveraged all the advantages of Nazarbayev University with the excellent intellectual capital it attracts. And I should also confess that we should be thankful to Provost Ade, because his experience in creating these research centers and institutes in North America and Asia was extremely valuable for us as well. So what did we do when we started ISAI? As first order of business, we adopted a set of ethical principles centered around 5 following pillars. So, societal well-being, AI for good, transparency, technical resilience and robustness, human-centered values, and accountability. From now on, whenever we start an AI project, we go through these rules and we ensure that all of our projects conform to these principles. Ethics is very important for us because in AI, you might make lots of mistakes if you don't take it seriously and as the first principle. So what is ISAI? People ask me, what is ISAI? I tell them ISAI is actually a number of young people working together. Our ISAI team consists of more than 30 researchers. It leverages the Bolashak scholars, in which Republic of Kazakhstan has sent more than 10,000 young people to top-notch universities around the world. And they returned back and they just constitute the core of our intellectual workforce. And also Nazarbayev University's own graduates, but also a number of students from other Kazakhstani universities who joined Nazarbayev University for graduate programs and become members of the ISAI research teams. In addition to this, in recent years, we started attracting international students, and in future this will accelerate. ISAI also has affiliated professors. And I should note that more than half of ISAI researchers are female, as our students in Nazarbayev University are. And it might be considered as our greatest competitive advantage because in Kazakhstan, women are in all aspects of life and they participate in everything. And in our team, they are our strongest members. Of course, we just create a set of good ethical principles and we just created a very good team. But of course, AI research requires resources. Right now, in order to conduct artificial intelligence research, one must create an infrastructure consisting of storage and AI computation servers from the NVIDIA company, for instance. And we as ISAI have created the most advanced AI computational lab in Kazakhstan. And we have gained very significant know-how and expertise in the use of these systems. We are sharing this expertise with the Nazarbayev University students and also all Kazakhstani researchers. So, what type of research we conduct? As I told you, our research should make a local impact, but it should also lead to publications and recognition in top venues around the world as well. And we brainstormed for a quite long time. And our team has come up with this initial project, which is a roadmap for AI-based speech and natural language processing technologies for the Kazakh language. So in September 2020, we have created the first Kazakh speech corpus and generated the first associated automatic speech recognition models, which was not present for Kazakh language before, and shared it open source with the world community. Afterwards, utilizing the expertise of our team, Dr. Yerbol Hasanov and Saida Musahojaeva, we have created the Kazakh narrator corpus, and we created the first digital voices in Kazakh language, Iseke and Raya, and we created text-to-speech synthesis engines. Then, noticing that in Kazakhstan we use three languages very frequently, Kazakh, English, and Russian, we just have expanded our Kazakh automatic speech recognition engine to three languages, and we created the trilingual speech recognition engine. And afterwards, in collaboration with the Haber News Agency, we have created the first named entity recognition database for Kazakh language. And our work is not finished yet. This roadmap will continue. We are right now working on text-to-speech synthesis with voice cloning. We are working on a Kazakh to English and Kazakh to Russian translation engine. And hopefully, leveraging all of these technological pieces, we will create the ISAI general purpose chatbot in Kazakh language by October 2022. We consider this project important because this project allows us to create the soft digital infrastructure of Kazakhstan. Because today, in the digital world, you cannot provide services in different areas such as banking without having these type of technological components created. And ISAI has created this for Kazakhstan and will continue to do so. But ISAI also collaborates with our faculty members, and Nazarbayev University faculty members are conducting cutting-edge research in very many different areas: civil engineering, physics, medicine, biology, petroleum engineering. And one of the emerging trusts converging trust is the optimal design using AI. For instance, with Professor Dichuan Zheng from Civil Engineering, we are doing AI-based design of reinforced concrete columns. This way, structural engineers do not have to spend significant amount of time, and we can also decrease the carbon footprint of the resulting columns because we are using AI to design these complex structures. Similarly, with the Professor Victor Bruce from the physics department, we are working on the AI-based design of organic solar cell materials. At the same time, we have a project with Professor Kostas Vologiampoulos on maximizing wireless power transfer on cylindrical load with deep neural networks. And we are also continuing our research in robotics. Robotics is one of the signature areas of Nazarbayev University. I gave the first lecture on robotics in 2011 to some of these panel members. And we have done great things so far. And for instance, Professor Matteo Rubagotti, who specializes on advanced control algorithms, works with us on creating deep optimal controllers using imitation learning. This way, instead of the older mathematical theories, we are using deep learning in order to create brains of robots which will do very complicated tasks. At the same time, we are focusing on tactile sensing. Our young professor, Professor Janat Kappasov, who was one of our first research assistants in Nazarbayev University, finished his PhD as a Talab scholar and returned back as a faculty member. Now is one of the world-renowned experts in tactile sensing and has a great laboratory. As Isai, we help him to create intelligent tactile sensors by merging the physical sensors with artificial intelligence algorithms. So this shows the complexity of research right now at Nazarbayev University and what type of advanced research we can conduct if we collaborate. Isai also interacts with industry and state sectors. Let me give you an example. The Department of State Revenues came to us with a problem. They wanted to know what is in the train wagons and trucks which are crossing the borders of Kazakhstan. And we told them, we can do that for you as long as you give us data and let us publish that. And that just kind of worked out as a great barter agreement. And they provided us lots of data. Our researchers used the most advanced object recognition engines and were able to create an object recognition system which figures out what is inside the train wagons and trucks. So this is, for instance, one of our collaborations with the state sector in Kazakhstan. Some of our faculty members in computer science collaborating with Isai are working on medical AI. Specifically, in one of our projects, we worked on automatic brain tumor segmentation. Gliomas are the most frequent primary brain tumors in adults, and recently, deep learning is being used in order to predict the tumor areas in the brain. So we have collected significant amount of images, MRI scans, from the Nur Sultan City hospitals after going through all the institutional research ethics regulations. And we used the doctors in Kazakhstan to annotate this data for us. Afterwards, we were able to create some type of tumor recognition engine which just showed very good results on unseen data. We continued on this medical AI project stream, and we have created a chest X-ray pathology classification system, which does not only classify the chest pathologies, but can also do explanatory visualization. Right now, one of the biggest problems of AI is it is a black box. We try to make it a dark gray box because you don't know how it is taking the decisions, and there are some methods which are telling us, such as this explanatory visualization. I just took this decision of cardiomegaly on this X-ray scan, and I made this decision by looking to the pixels in this region of the X-ray scan. Here, cardiomegaly, which means heart enlargement, is caused by the enlarged heart, and that region of the image is red and the rest is blue. We are also working on multimodal systems. For instance, right now, researchers either work on magnetic resonance imaging or PET imaging in order to determine whether someone has Alzheimer's disease, dementia, or some type of cognitive disorder. We used in ISAI multiple modalities together, and by using MRI and PET scans at the same time, we achieved higher classification accuracies of these medical problems. So in ISAI, we want to be recognized in the world. And in the field of data science and artificial intelligence, one of the ways you can achieve that is creating landmark data sets. So one of our signature projects is the Speaking Faces dataset, which is the first large-scale data set which merges thermal imaging, visual imaging, and audio signals in the same data set. And we have collected data from 142 subjects, gender balanced, ethnically balanced, and using this data set, we can just work on very many different projects, ranging from multimodal face recognition, face detection, facial landmark extraction, speech and audio recognition, and generative adversarial neural networks for creating new faces. People ask us why we are creating these multimodal data sets, and here is the example. Here, our researcher is running his latest face detection and facial landmark extraction engine. And as you can see on the left and right, you see the same boxes. But when the image becomes dark, which just shows low illumination or darkness, the visual stream does not work. But on the other hand, the thermal stream works all the time. Of course, the thermal stream has less amount of details, and when there is good illumination, it is better to use the visual stream. And in this context, here, this is one of the areas where we have utilized the speaking faces. And I want to just show you one of our latest research projects. So at ISAI, we just interact with Nazarbayev University, and Nazarbayev University has a very strong computer science department, and at the same time, it has a very strong robotics department. And with the students from robotics and computer science, we are working on this human memory augmentation project. We are using the augmented reality technology. Augmented reality technology developed tremendously in the last 5 years. You are here seeing our PhD student donning the Microsoft HoloLens 2 augmented reality goggles, which has a mini supercomputer inside, more than 10 cameras, depth cameras, laser rangefinders, microphone arrays, and many other sensors. So that device can acquire more information than a human being regarding the surrounding area, and it also knows where it is. So for instance, when our researcher walks in the corridor, the device understands where it is on that corridor, and in addition to that, it sees what the person sees as well, and it can recognize all of those objects. It just sees the potted plant and it recognizes it and creates some type of memory map, a spatiotemporal memory which just records all of these objects. And later, when the person needs to remember where those objects are, it just simply tells, hey, do you want to know where the teddy bear is? It is on the 4th floor in this upper left corridor. This way, we are augmenting for the first time human intelligence using augmented reality. This is, in my opinion, a very interesting project, cutting-edge research, which just shows that we can now start utilizing augmented reality powered with artificial intelligence to solve many of our cognitive problems. And this will become something important for people with dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So how are we connecting all of these research results with the rest of the world? Of course, as classically, as regular researchers do, we are working on writing publications, and ISAI publishes its research results in top journals and conferences. But for the first time in Central Asia and in our region, we are sharing our data sets created by our institute as open source and publicly available data sets. And here are some of them: Kazakh speech corpus, thermal faces in the wild, Uzbek speech corpus, Kazakh text-to-speech dataset, Kazakh accented English, and Wi-Fi signature-based indoor localization datasets. Now, this is important because this allows us to be recognized by very many local and international entities and organizations, and also lets us impact the local Kazakhstani economy. So far, these datasets have been downloaded by more than 300 prominent local and international organizations. The top Kazakhstani universities: Satpayev University, Almaty University of Power Engineering, Al-Farabi University, international universities, more than 100, starting with National Taiwan University to Moscow State to Johns Hopkins and University of Calgary, and international tech giants which download our datasets and create products and services for the Kazakh language, for instance, Microsoft, Google, Yandex, Facebook, and Tencent. And also local Kazakhstani companies like Kaspi Bank, Jusam Bank, BTS Digital, Tanger Labs, who use these datasets as well. So we have seen that creating these datasets and sharing it for free creates a significant amount of interaction between us and all of these entities, and then they just come to us for us to solve their problems. And of course, with datasets, we can interact with research communities, universities, and also top companies. But how can we increase the AI know-how of Kazakhstan? We can only train so many researchers in ISAI, maybe 30, 40 lucky individuals. But through our ISAI educational YouTube channel, we reach the crowds. We create AI tutorials and lectures in Kazakh and English languages. And so far, we have more than 160 videos, which have attracted more than 25,000 views. And whenever we create a new research project, we just create the associated tutorials, and we allow the Kazakhstani research community to experience those tutorials such that they can also participate in cutting-edge research. ISAI also interacts with international organizations. In Central Asia, we are the first academic member of the International Telecommunications Union, and ISAI participates very frequently in the working groups of this union and provides lots of opinion and white papers to that. At the same time, we publish our research in IEEE journals and conferences, and our research team is a member of this organization and participates in different working groups of IEEE. Also, we have realized that in Kazakhstan, we were talking a lot about data science and data, but there was no official repository which can issue digital object identifiers to research data and artifacts. As ISAI, we became the first member of data site in Central Asia as well, and this way we can issue digital object identifiers to research datasets. So far, we have more than 20 datasets with digital object identifiers hosted as ISAI repositories. And one more thing, one of the greatest problems of AI today is the reproducibility crisis. Sometimes with good intentions, sometimes with bad, AI researchers pick the best results they obtain and use them to write their papers. And when other researchers try to replicate their results, it is nearly impossible to reach them. And that is why right now, all the prominent research groups are sharing their models and data open source in internet. For instance, here we are using GitHub, and we share our projects in this GitHub channel. This had very interesting secondary benefits. I sometimes hire new research assistants and tell them, why don't you just kind of like start with our speaking faces pipeline and learn that? And he tells that, hey, I already know it. I just went to your GitHub channel and watched your YouTube tutorials and I learned everything. And sometimes I just get a message from a high schooler who tells me, I have been working on your Kazakh TTS project in GitHub, and I think I found a mistake in your data augmentation. And we just kind of go and check and realize that they really pinpointed a bug for us. So basically, by sharing, we are both countering the effects of the reproducibility crisis and also gaining from the collective wisdom of the community. And ISAI is also getting lots of media attention and coverage. Our researchers are frequently called to give their opinion in top venues such as Wired News, Irish Tech News, Pharma Web, and also lots of other Kazakhstani venues. And this way we are increasing the reputation and recognition of both Nazarbayev University and Kazakhstan. So, I just provided you a glimpse on our research. In order to read more about research, read about our publications, and to try our demos, please visit our website isai.nu.edu.kz. So, this is a very interesting event. I am giving this lecture at World Expo. And when you just come to this World Expo, you realize that the world is very small, and except our superficial differences, all countries and all people are very similar to each other. So therefore, we want to achieve great things with your participation, and we invite all of you to collaborate with us and also join our research teams as researchers. Please contact us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Varol. This was really a tour de force of the ISAI accomplishments. And also you showcased for our audience the importance of AI and its social significance. I think this panel now will focus a bit more on how we can cultivate the human capital that is needed to make AI useful around the world. We have a panel of experts from various areas of education and industry. They will present their own opinions, and we will give them the time to give an opening statement. Then we will continue with the questions and answers. There is a QR code that you can all use. We will collect and cluster those questions, and then we will use them to address our panel. Our very first speaker is Professor Tayyeb Znati. He is the Dean of the College of Information Technology at the United Arab Emirates University, our partner at AUA. Before joining UAEU, he was the professor and chair of the Computer Science Department at the University of Pittsburgh. And Professor Znati has had a long and distinguished career in advanced computing, including being the director of the NSF Directorate of Computer and Network Systems. Tayyeb, thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I speak in that.
Yes.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to be here. When I was in NSF, one of the things that I really wanted to do so much is visit Kazakhstan and all these countries, but unfortunately back then, I started fairly early in NSF, it was 2000, and I couldn't manage to get a reason or an excuse for me to go there. But I'm so pleased that I joined you here because it was impressive. I mean, I am truly impressed with what you have been able to accomplish. And I hope today I can share with you some of the experiences I had. By the way, we're doubly linked, Dr. Because I am also from University of Pittsburgh, and then you have a connection there. So we're doubly cousins in a way. So I wrote the first 5 or 6 slides, and then I throw them away because I didn't want them to be high level and all that stuff. Sometimes when I attend panels, we can come down a little bit and be able to say something more concrete. So what I wanted to do is share with you what I tried to do at the university, United Arab Emirates University, and then tell you where I position, how I see the future of AI. So I'm going to be very pragmatic in the way I talk, and I'm going to kind of expose my ideas, and hopefully I can get some feedback from you. So this is my college there. You can see it's actually a beautiful one. There was a gift from some rich people in the United Arab Emirates before I came here. And what I would like to point out that when I came here, I was a little bit how can I say, surprised that the focus was still in IT. The focus was in coding and all that stuff. But the field of computer science and other domains actually have moved beyond that. So it's about what I consider to be computing. Computing is not computer science necessarily, even though computer science is a big part of it. Computing is the ability to really solve problems in the context of the domain or the application. And that has to do with the abstraction, it has to do with the choice of the right data structure and the algorithms. And finally, you're going to pick up the language that would allow you to take those ideas and then speak to the computer, so to speak, because that's really what the coding is about. But before you get to that stage, you have to be able to solve the problem in the proper context. And then the explosion of AI, machine learning, and data science kind of transformed the way we do science. In my days, when I started doing science, is really kind of model the system, go again, try it, make mistakes, come back, and it takes a long time. Sometimes you don't have enough data to be able to look at all possible cases and so on and so forth. Data transformed completely that. Back in, I would say 30 years ago, if you give a statistician a large amount of data, what they do sampling. They actually reduced and then try to model it as some sort of an exponential distribution, all that stuff. And in many cases, complex systems that we're faced with every day are really not amenable to specific modeling using a specific, easy to manipulate mathematically distribution like exponential or Gaussian or so on and so forth. Why? Because this complex system have what we call emergent behaviors that occur and you don't know it. It's like there's like a tipping point where a pond that used to be functioning properly and an extra drop of acid, and all of a sudden you see the fish going belly up. That emergent behavior is extremely difficult to specify and extremely difficult to be able to prepare for, so to speak. So we know how to deal with complicated systems because we can pin the behavior of a complicated system to the behavior of its component. So this thing here in front of me is a complicated system. But if my laptop breaks down, I can say the hard drive crashed. But if you take a complex system, because of the combinatorics involved in all the interaction between all the elements, and some of them will be heterogeneous elements, then it's extremely difficult to do that. So I would like to emphasize it's just not about coding, even though coding is extremely important. You have to be the best coder in the world. But it's also about computing, with this ability of abstraction, automation, using the right principle in order for you to solve the problem properly. If you do that, then you're really impacting everything. Now, these three, computing and the other three disciplines, or I would say areas, impact everything, natural sciences, and you name it. And then by doing so, you're going to be impacting all the disciplines on top of that. So computing is no longer part of computer science only. It actually belongs to everybody. Okay. So when I start thinking, so when I came here and we have a College of Information Technology. By the way, the name's going to change soon. It become College of Computing and Informatics, because that's really where we're going. And we have a department called Computer and Network Engineering. That department will become Autonomous and Intelligent Systems Engineering. You can see that we are not excluding computer engineering. We're not excluding networking engineering, but we are expanding it to be able to see that intelligence is it has to be part of everything we do in the future. I mean, Bill Gates many years ago said there's not going to be a piece of code that comes out of Microsoft without having some intelligence in it. And that's where the field is setting. So I picked this definition. I could have picked any other definition for that purpose. But essentially when we talk about intelligence, is the ability, or computer intelligence or artificial intelligence, which is kind of a misnomer really, is the fact that the computer can do tasks that a human being can do as well. Okay? And then a lot of people struggle to define what that really means. And there's so many tests, from Turing tests, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today, all the way up to coffee tests and so on and so forth. But Turing test says it actually involves a computer, a human, sitting with the computer, and a third or second a human who's out of sight of the both of them. So the human is the kind of the person who's going to define where intelligence belong. That person that cannot see the computer or the other human, and then the person engages in a conversation with the computer and the human. And if the computer will be as intelligent as a human, if that person cannot recognize who he is conversing with. He cannot say, I'm speaking to a human or I'm speaking to a computer. That's actually tested. The test is very good. I mean, everybody knows Turing. I'm sure the computer scientists know him anyway. But he's some sort of a genius, basically. He's Turing Award is like the Nobel Prize Award of some sort for computer scientists. The problem is it does not, specify what intelligence really means. So if a computer is disqualified if that person discovered that the conversation with that computer. But the computer could be smarter than actually the other person that's speaking with us. So therefore, it's not a good thing, okay? But everybody agrees that intelligence is a bunch of these things that is here. Basically, the ability to know and plan, sense, detect, natural language, represent knowledge, either including the common knowledge and so on and so forth. And that gave rise to these three classification of AI. The first one is what we call this current AI, the classic AI, or the narrow AI. This really is a type of AI that's prevalent right now. And the problem with this type of AI is when you exercise or you develop some knowledge using narrow AI, that you can really carry through that knowledge to a different domain. So what you learned in domain A may not necessarily be applicable in domain B. And there is a bunch of other things, including the resources that it requires. I mean, some algorithm work, if you give them 300 billion type of pieces of data in order for the algorithm to understand and figure out what's going on. The second one, which is called the general AI, here there is this ability. So the first one is kind of predictive AI. If you train me to recognize faces, I'm going to be able to recognize people. But I'm not going to be able to apply that knowledge to recognize, let's say, tigers or something like that, unless you train me to do so in that specific domain. So the second one is a bit more perception as opposed to just prediction. And the third one is superintelligence, which is that point in time where the intelligence of the computers will be much higher than the intelligence of the people, and only God knows what's going to happen there. Are we going to be gone, or are we going to be able to benefit and work with them properly? The reason I talk about this is what is it that we're going to teach to our students now? So, well, it's simple. Well, it's not that simple because our field changes very, very fast. So I'm going to tell you a story that I struggle with right now as I'm creating a new database system, okay? Database scientists, typically what they're supposed to do, they take data, they sanitize it, maybe normalize it, then they extract features, optimize the features, use the right model, and then send it to this, basically execute the data, be able to get the information displayed as a graphic, using graphic tools or whatever you want to do, and then you're done. That's what a data scientist is supposed to do. But there's a thing called AutoML that does exactly that. That is what I told you is a pipeline. You feed your data in there. AutoML, automatic machine learning, will do exactly that and gives you the result. So here I am engaging in creating a program where the first cohort will not graduate until 4 years from now. I am already worried about them not getting jobs because AutoML can take over. So you have to be very careful of that when you build these programs. Okay, so the other thing that I use is this is a Gartner hype cycle, basically. It says how the technology comes up, a lot of hype in the beginning, and then it decreases, and at some point it stabilizes. So that's the model that is, there's a lot of research that's trying to fix this model because it's not accurate all the time, but it gives you an idea where we go. So I want to show you that in 2016, this is the cycle that Gartner put forth. And you can see at the tip of that cycle, the focus was in machine learning. Okay, that's less than 6 years ago. If you look at 2021, the focus is in generative AI, and it's no longer machine learning. And actually, there is transformers now. There's a bunch of fields that probably will make deep learning and machine learning obsolete in the near future because of their limitation, their excessive use of power, computational power and energy and all that stuff already. So now we're going to generative AI, which means creation of AI. There are people who are writing programs that actually make beautiful poetry. They can make art that is very similar to what people are doing. And this is only in 6 years. Okay, so the fact that our field moves so fast has to be a factor of what we do in order for us to succeed as educators and people who prepare the next generation of task force and AI. So my drivers have been all the time is relevance. Whenever you do program, you have to be relevant in the context you're developing the program to. The second thing is employability. I mean, students have to go there and be able to get a job. And finally, you would like to do impact. Doing computing for good is what all humanity is about, in my opinion. So based on that context, I'm developing now data science and AI courses that uses this structure. The structure here is composed essentially with 3 parts. The first one is typical. That would be the gen ads that everybody has to take, including the ethics, learning about ethics of computing and AI in general. But what this program does, it achieves a number of issues. The first one is the foundation. So if you build a data science program and all what the student gain is the fact they're going to use Python libraries to be able to process data and show results, then you're not doing your job. Because as I said, that job may be gone in 5 to 6 years. So what you need is foundations. Foundation. You need very good mathematical skills, you need very good statistical skills, and you need very good computational skills. If you don't do that, one of my German professor, I remember he used to say, fundamentals is what you remember when you forget everything. And I think that was so right, because that's what I remember. Every time I'm confronted with something, I go to the fundamentals, and I'd be able to derive that and understand it better. That I never forget. But like an equation here and there, I mean, with age, practically it's done. So that's the first thing. The emphasis, a lot of students don't like math and don't like statistics. If you don't understand inferences, if you don't understand Bayesian theory, there is no way you can do machine learning and be able to deliver at the expected level. So this is why I think the foundations and the message to the students has to be clear. The second thing that is in that structure is the intertwining of the domain and machine learning. And I will tell you, we're doing this for many reasons. Okay. First of all, I do not want people or my students to go to an interview, Google or Facebook or any of the companies here, say, I am expert in business intelligence. And it turned out that the person has taken one course in business. No, that's not enough. How can you speak to somebody like from a bank who knows the field very, very well? He or she would be fluent in what they does, and you try to convince them that you're going to use machine learning tool in order for them to look at the interplay between the information and then between the knowledge they're trying to acquire, and then let them play what if scenarios and do the job that they're supposed to be helping. You're not going to be able to do that until you understand the domain fairly clearly. The second thing, the United Arab Emirates is not the United States in a way, in terms of the scope and the size of the country. If you're going to produce the same type of students, you're going to be successful in the few first years. And then the students are going to be competing with each other. It did happen in many programs before me, including networking. I mean, the program was extremely successful and then saturated the field that everybody had the same skills. And all of a sudden they can't get jobs anymore. So this here, it intertwines the AI knowledge and the domain knowledge in a meaningful way. And then also it depicts many paths. So I show 3 classes here. The first one is business intelligence, so AI for business analytics, basically. The second one is for computational stuff. People who are going to be developing this program, running the MapReduce, the Hadoop, the cloud computing stuff. They're going to be computational people, computational thinkers, but with skills in AI. And the third one will be healthcare. This program allows you to grow in scope as well as in scale, okay? Because all what you need to do is add the foundation, intertwine it with the program, and then you're going to create AI for law, for example, or AI for medicine, or whatever scheme you have, okay? So, 2 more slides. I know that the other panelists are nervous, me taking all the time. So this is the design principle of that. The first thing is don't have colleges teach discipline or courses where the expertise is not there. I mean, when I came in, some of my faculty were teaching probability and statistics. Say, no, you're going to read the book for the students if you do that. You're not an expert. Let the statistics people do that. So that's what it does. The foundation will be, this is a multidisciplinary program. The statistic, probability, Bayesian theory, inferences will be done by the College of Statistics and Economics. The computational thinking is done by us, and the math is by the College of Science. And that's where the expertise belong, okay? So the second thing is this multiple paths for the student. So the students can personalize, and I will be elated if one of my students starts as a CIT student, discovers that his passion is business intelligence, and then he moves toward that path and graduates there. For me, that's a success. Because at the end of the day, we're not here to impose our thoughts on the students, but to let the students personalize their experiences to their work. And the third thing is this ownership. So when 3 colleges own the same program, CIT does not own this program, College of Science does not, and College of Economics does not in this case here, or College of Medicine. All of us, we own it, and nobody owns the whole thing. So we're going to be able to work together to make this one successful. And finally is a financial issue. When you allow different colleges to create data science program, you're going to have a proliferation of a replica of almost the same thing, but the sum of which never exceeds the sum of the whole. And that's very, very bad because financially you're going to be done. So by putting expertise where they belong and doing a multidisciplinary program, I think it's a good way. So I believe this is how we should teach AI. AI should not be taught for the sake of AI. It should be taught for the sake of making an impact and then benefiting society. And one way to do that is to be good in AI and good in the domains. That's the only time you can actually make the difference. With that, I thank you for everybody, and then I look at
Thank you, Tayyip, for a very provocative presentation. I think we will have the opportunity to discuss it a little bit later on.
Thank you.
Our second panelist is Dr. Sadab Khan. He is the Director of AI for Healthcare Informatics at Group 42, an Abu Dhabi company with a very distinguished international presence in the field of AI and cloud computing. He is also a key participant in the drive of the Mohammed bin Zayed Artificial Intelligence University towards accreditation, and he is also a key member of the team that developed the curricula for the university. Dr. Khan, floor is yours.
Thank you. So I want to begin my talk with just talking about a couple of things first. First, the 5 major skills that I think the AI researchers and innovators of tomorrow would need to have, and then discussing a bit about the ecosystem that would be necessary to facilitate this training and research and education for these AI leaders of tomorrow. And then I'll share some personal thoughts on how we approach training and mentorship at G42, what we look for in recruiting our new team members and so on, just as a guidance for future students who are graduating. So, these skills are not very specific to AI, although I will talk about, which of these skills are emerging as, somewhat more important for AI leaders. So let's begin with technical skills, right? And as Professor Znati correctly pointed out, fundamentals are incompromisable, right? And you would need skills in mathematics and computing and programming and so on to be able to express yourself in the field of AI and machine learning, and that just goes without saying. You need to have that. But you also need to have creativity, right? And we've seen, I would define creativity as the ability to come up with new and valuable solutions. And we've seen creativity come up not just in development of new AI methods, such as generative adversarial networks, one of my favorites, but also in the application of these AI methods, such as for solving problems in climate modeling or predicting structures of 3D proteins and so on. Creativity would be key for us as we move forward, for the students to be able to apply the knowledge that they have in new and emerging areas where there are long-standing challenges which can perhaps be addressed with the explosion of data as we're seeing today. I think critical thinking again is going to be extremely important. I would define critical thinking as the ability to make a decision or form a judgment by analyzing a number of different information coming from different sources, right? And I would also actually stretch that definition and say that you would also need skills in being able to design good experiments and then make observations and then draw inferences from those experiments. And this is again a fundamental skill that you need to have as a researcher. But increasingly in the lean startup movement, we're also seeing that even the startup founders now need to possess these critical thinking skills to be able to design good experiments to test their hypotheses in real world and see if their solutions fly. AI leaders of tomorrow would be part of large big teams, interdisciplinary teams. So it goes without saying they need good social and behavioral skills, right? There would be no place for brilliant jerks, even if they exist, with their AI knowledge and so on. I think increasingly, when I think about what are the problems that are worthwhile for us to work on, I think any problem worth working on would definitely require a large team, right? And we're increasingly seeing the big AI successes that we hear of. For example, again, the protein structure problem that we saw a great solution come out from another London-based company, DeepMind. It involved computational biologists, mathematicians, physicists, and as well as computer scientists. And I think we're going to continue seeing that trends of large teams coming together to co-create solutions that wouldn't exist otherwise. And lastly, this is a skill that I think the AI leaders of tomorrow would need that perhaps isn't as well emphasized today. And those are skills in humanities. The AI researchers and innovators of tomorrow would need to know and understand the societal implications of their work. They would need to understand how to best guard against the different forms of biases creeping into their solutions, and how to guard against the unethical use of their solutions. Although I realize that's much easier said than done. And I was very heartened and pleased to see, professor from our friend from Nazarbayev University, Professor Atakan, highlight that as one of the principles that they follow at ESI as well. So I think this is definitely going to be very important for the future AI leaders to know and practice. Now, to inculcate these skills, I think the educators and mentors from both industry, academia, and so on would need to adopt pedagogy that encourages development of these skills, right? And I don't want to preach to the choir here, but some of the tools, for example, that one could think to incorporate for developing or encouraging critical thinking skills would be to have students synthesize evidence from a variety of sources, where they're forced to understand what are the drawbacks and limitations of the different sources of information that they're working with to arrive at a conclusion. Incorporating problem-based learning in their education, and again, going back to the Professor Zanati's slide, there was a capstone project right at the top, and so incorporating these real-world applications into the curriculum would be extremely important. Next, I think the AI researchers and innovators of tomorrow again would need a healthy ecosystem for their training to be effective and for them to succeed. We'll definitely need academia to train the future leaders. We would need industries to provide the jobs, but we would also need regulators to create a healthy, regulated environment for these AI leaders to implement their solutions, to ensure there's a healthy competition among the startups and the companies that are competing for winning the businesses based on AI-driven solutions. But we would also need funding to fund fundamental and applied research that involves AI. We would need funding to help ensure that our AI-based startups are able to go to market with the products that are going to be impactful. And lastly, I think we definitely need to have the right incentives in play to ensure that there's time and space for these AI innovators to grow. For example, if we want to encourage academics to train more AI leaders of tomorrow, we need to ensure they have the right time and space to be able to mentor them. Teaching 4 courses in a semester is probably not the best idea if that's the goal of your university, for example. Lastly, just some personal thoughts on what we usually look for when we recruit new interns or full-time members. We, apart from the technical skills and the social and behavioral skills and so on, we really like to see a learning mindset, right? As Professor Znati correctly pointed out, today we're teaching students to build these data pipelines. In 4 years from now, that may be obsolete, right? And we're already seeing, for example, in AI research, there are these new forms of neural network architectures driven by transformers as their building blocks, which are increasingly replacing the old and conventional ways of building the architectures for computer vision work, which were centered around convolutional neural networks. So if you have a student who doesn't bring in the learning mindset, or an employee who doesn't bring in a learning mindset, that would be of significant concern for us, as one of the members of industry. And second, we would really like to see students who are not afraid to, go beyond the boundaries of their training program, right? And so, particularly I lead a team of healthcare applied scientists, and so while we focus heavily on the skills in data science and machine learning and AI, we also like to see, that the employees that we bring into our team are enthusiastic about the domain that we're working in healthcare, right? And so you should be excited about the domain that you're working on. You should embrace the vocabulary that this domain requires for success, and you would need for communication. So those are just some of my thoughts on how I think we should be training the future AI leaders. Thank you.
We switch now to the business world. Our next panelist is Artur Saudabayev. He is the co-founder and chief technology officer of Kozali, a London, UK-based startup, high-tech startup that is specializing in extracting knowledge and interpreting knowledge for health informatics.
Biomedical research.
Yes, you will explain, of course, this much better. We are very happy to have Artur with us because he was a faculty member at Nazarbayev University, and we are very proud of his accomplishments.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Dear Provost, dear professors, thank you for this opportunity. It indeed feels wonderful because my career actually started also in Professor Varol's laboratory, where I was the second research assistant. And I've spent there several years in academia before moving to the applications side of AI in industry. And I would like to share today a few of the insights and ideas on the topic that I have acquired over executing research, teaching, and then the application side of AI. In fact, AI, I find it an absolutely astonishing field. And when I saw the topic of today's session, as an avid reader of a sci-fi, I immediately thought of one of the most stellar novels of this century, I think, The Three-Body Problem. And I'll give a little bit of a spoiler there, I'm sorry. Humanity is attacked by aliens, not surprisingly so. And aliens do, at some point, one single thing: they disrupt our ability to carry out physics research, experimentation specifically. And knocking out this one ability to run particle physics experiments completely halts our humanity's progress in material science, in robotics, and artificial intelligence, in many, many areas. And I found this example very fascinating because it felt very real, very practical, and it showed how these topics are inherently multidisciplinary, and all these disciplines that constitute them are essential for their success. And the two previous speeches resonated with me very well because AI today, despite all the hype and various perceptions of it, is not a homogeneous single phenomena. It's comprised of many things. It is machine learning, it's programming, data science, but even in that, the complexity is, well, let's say two-dimensional there, right? We can put at the bottom layer the fundamental subjects, the fundamental disciplines like mathematics, physics, programming, logic. I think that's not here. And these bottom layer then aggregates on the next layer of complexity, which is intelligent systems, machine learning, data science, and this all together comes as an AI. And every single discipline within this map of what makes an AI matters dramatically. From here, I would like to make a question on how would we make AI successful. Education is one of the pillar and cornerstones of this activity. The second how then comes of how do we make AI education successful? And I would like to bring a thesis that it would take a systems strategic approach led by a government to build up in the long-term success of what's possible in AI. From this thesis, let me ask further two questions. Why government? So if we take the first map of what makes an AI, it grows further in complexity, if you think about it, of how do we make this subject successful? And a multitude of questions arise. How well our secondary education is in mathematics, how well are we equipping the alumni with jobs on the market, how well are startups funded, how well are these jobs perceived, is it prestigious to be a machine learning engineer, are intelligence systems engineer being well paid, and many of these questions that overlay on something that is in essence a mandate of a government. If you see the structure of ministries, these governments, they're structured to have the mandate to transform these fields in finance and education and general economy. So I believe that it will take a cross-functional accountability and management that only governments possess today largely across the world, and they can execute this towards a success. I don't believe that any single separate institution can carry such job. And that leads to the second question, which is why systemic and strategic? Because the complexity of this map of what to build leads to the further fact that one single measure will never be enough in this approach. There are many examples, right, of governments would start significantly funding AI startups. But just funding AI startups never creates this closed, sufficient ecosystem that end-to-end delivers value to society. Or government starts funding a single dimension of machine learning research, or introduces AI as courses in the curricula. These isolated measures will never be enough for systemic change and transformation. And thinking in this matter, what I started observing and experiencing directly about building a company in the United Kingdom was what are the trends right now, and how do they impact in the industry and education? Despite the hype about AI that carries both good and bad, There's definitely a lot of AI professionals that don't like to be called AI professionals, technically. Then there is definitely a benefit that a lot of countries, governments and institutions are really looking into this domain, into this phenomena, and trying to understand where are they placed in this AI race. They try to decompose and scope what the AI term really means and place it within their system. This leads to further elaboration on the points that I mentioned before of where the different industries are standing, how our different jobs are perceived. Are, for example, children's dreaming about being machine learning engineers like they used to dream of being astronauts or cosmonauts in the past. All of these things are being really mapped out. A lot of agencies and institutions are emerging within the systems of government. And that already leads to certain educational impact and benefit that is observable and, most importantly, measurable. So on the higher level of system structure that I was able to chart out, I believe that there are 4 critical processes that need to exist and continuously carried out on the accountability of governmental institutions to bring us further and progress in artificial intelligence. The first one is usually typical in any management process, is scoping down a term and the problem domain and really measuring it as much as possible. And as an example of this process in the United Kingdom, you could see such measures. You could see that there are agencies that look directly into AI-related things, and they measure the impact. For example, AI is predicted to increase UK national GDP by 10.3%. It's a very specific number that is derived by a very specific methodology. AI could boost productivity in some UK industries by 30%. There is a similar large report in Germany related to Industry 4.0, trying to measure how the automation would transform current industry map in Germany. This measurement then and problem scoping and definition leads to charting out a strategic plan. What's required there, of course, is understand all the opportunities and risks. And these also are very available in the United Kingdom. You could see that the risks are stated. There is lack of investment in AI for education. Brexit was its own a big risk because a lot of workforce traveled abroad, left the country. A lot of research funding was suspended. A lot of projects had logistical issues. And along with that, also to plan and risk. So what if we are successful in our AI business? So what will happen then to the job market, and how many people will we need to retrain? How many people then jobs are at risk? So this is a very complex and gargantuan work that then should translate into a strategic plan that should be executed and by the government, which also must be held accountable, I think, for its success. And in terms of execution and systemic transformation that I could observe in the United Kingdom are very functional for-profit and not-for-profit governmental and not governmental institutions that carry certain work on behalf of this strategic plan. For example, there is the UK Office for Artificial Intelligence that belongs to both actually ministries of business and trade and Ministry of Digital Technology and Culture. It owns a lot of this execution of the strategic planning. There are not-for-profit institutions like Tech Nation, of which the very user I was, because I had to go to Tech Nation and explain what I work on, and they would qualify me as a person who would qualify for a visa, right? And a lot of my colleagues at the company who traveled, who moved to the UK, they went through the process of being qualified in a specific industry for a very specific thing that they do, to be granted such. And very related to the education is a plan, for example, to introduce AI solutions at 60 colleges and 30 different universities within 5 years, where one of the largest IT organizations of the UK is undertaking. These, I think, are not all the measures that it would take to get us there, but you could already see that the AI race and appreciating the complexity of the matter of this inherently multidisciplinary subject that could affect almost all aspects of society's life, of people's life, is emerging right now, taking its shape. And I think for as long as we would follow this and enhance this cycle continuously going forward, bigger success we would nurture with AI.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next panel member is Bauzan Aubakir. He is the Director of AI and Data Science of Jusan Bank, a financial conglomerate based in Almaty, Kazakhstan, with significant banking and financial operations in Central Asia and beyond. He's also a graduate of Nazarbayev University, holding a BS and MS degree from our robotics department. Bauzan, the floor is yours.
Thank you for introduction. Thank you, Professor Provost, for the invitation here. And today I would like to talk on the very interesting topic, how in Jusan Bank, it's like more practical way, how in Jusan Bank we train our AI workforce. Of course, we don't call them officially AI workforce, we call them our engineers, our experts, and how basically we motivate them in order to increase the efficiency of the business. And of course, as a businessman, I always say our first goal is to earn money. How we earn money for our shareholders, for our company. So first of all, let's not be confused with the name Jusan Bank. It's not only bank. Like the core business is the bank. It's one of the largest banks in Kazakhstan, and in fact, it is the fastest growing bank right now. It's a marketplace, so you can basically buy maybe matches or an iPhone, everything from our marketplace. We are a telecom operator, so you can connect your internet to us or you can buy a SIM card from us. We are #1 online brokerage, so you can buy shares in any company. And we are #6 insurance company. So as you can see, all of these businesses generate tremendous amounts of data about each client that we have in the bank. And we have to leverage that advantage. We have to use that in order to, first of all, make an experience for our customers better and more well-suited. And what products we offer? Of course, like regular banking products, loans, cards, savings, payments, etc. Our clients can invest through us. You can open a kid's card and you can buy a SIM card from us. You can insure your assets. And you can basically buy anything from the local mall and it will be delivered to you. So basically our app is, as we say, is the only app that you need. You don't need anything else. So we have more than 1 million active clients. And, you know, it's just a big number. It's a nice big number, but behind that each number, there is a person with his own pains, with his own needs. And as we say, we have about each client approximately 25,000 parameters that we can describe with. You can use these parameters to describe each person. And like, obviously, you have to be ethical about that. First, like #1 confidential information about each person is, of course, the medical information. #2 is how much money you have on your bank account. And on what things you spend that money. So we have to be extremely ethical with this data, but you can build really beautiful things with this data. You can recommend like things, you can recommend the products and services, you can extremely personalize the banking service. Now, in order to do that, the first thing that you need is actually people. You have to train people, and because we are business, you have to, like the person that is working with you, engineer who is coding, has to understand the business. So there are actually two ways to do that, like to train an AI specialist. Take a banker, teach him AI, like teach him how to code, how to understand like proper statistics that he needs, and you will get an AI banker. Or you take a very well-skilled, technically skilled person, train him in banking, and he becomes an also AI banker. And as a Jusam Bank, we chose the second way. We take a very technically educated people and we teach them banking. Because first of all, we are a bank, right? So obviously we have some people who know something about banking. So it's easier to hire the technical specialist. And on the other hand, hiring the bankers, they typically have higher salaries. It's very hard to hire them. They have higher salaries. They have higher expectations. On the other hand, engineers are a bit cheaper. I'm not saying they are cheap, but a bit cheaper. So this is the structure of the department where I work. We have 46 people. 0 of them previously worked in a bank. And 14 are very good engineers. They're really amazing engineers. And 32 of them are fresh graduates. So we are not shy of hiring basically a new person to the workforce. Because when we hire them at the short notice, they become extremely loyal because you are teaching them the banking, one of the most closed industries, one of the most, I would say, like well-protected industries where like, if you work in the bank, you will be hired in another bank. That's how the like pipeline of people goes. They are just jumping from bank to bank. And we are introducing new people and they are actually making disruption within even our bank. We are automating a lot of things. We are using data to automate the things. And we are basically, people are losing jobs because of us. And I'm proud of that. So, as I said, we hire non-banking experts and train them in the field. We have a lot of banking knowledge, and investment in those people generates incredible amounts of loyalty. I'm pretty sure the 14 people I talked about, the experts, they can be hired at a moment's notice to a Google, to a Facebook, to any company that we have, to any big company. But they are not doing that. They are not switching jobs because in our department, we provide them with knowledge and we have access. We give them access to all of the information. That's not just like how to code in Python, etc. How this particular banking, how we decide which interest rate to give to each person. We teach them that, and that generates a loyalty, and people they want to be a part of a company that is growing extremely fast. You don't have that experience every day, that you are part of basically company that is growing 300% per year. Now, as I said at the beginning, AI is, when we talk about in business, it's not about hiring, because currently, for example, let's talk about call center. Hiring an NLP expert, natural language processing, is extremely expensive event, unbelievably expensive event. So you cannot just solve all of your problems by hiring, because at the end of the day, your salaries will be larger than your income. So what we do is we train people. we take fresh graduates, we take engineers, and we train them in banking. We support them always. Like, if you need some training, education, go ahead, do that. If you need some explanation about banking, go ahead. We have literally 1,000 people who are experts in banking. We let them ask the questions, and we allow people to be open about things that they don't know in the bank. Because we always tell, we have no idea what we are doing. We have no idea how the bank earned the money. But we are the ones who are not afraid to go and ask the question. And tools, of course. Tools, I mean, just the machinery that we have, the servers, the hardware, the software, and you have to provide that. And when you combine all of that, you get one of the most profitable divisions in the conglomerate. And we are working like less than 1 year, but we are coming to become number one in the profitability within the bank. And when we talk about that, like our final goal is when the person arrives to our bank, we have a plan for him for the coming 3 years, what he will do. So this is it, I think, about me. Yeah.
And last but not least, Professor Varol.
All right. It is always very interesting to listen to things from the banker's perspective. It was thought-provoking indeed. So let me start my second presentation right now. I will be talking about something which I don't know how we are doing. Indeed, it will be in some sense a confession. So when we look at today, I think today can be best described with the first opening paragraph of one of my favorite books, A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of the times, it was the worst of the times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. Indeed, when we look at right now to the world, we see an epidemic, lots of regional conflicts, lots of economic problems, but we also see the humanity still moving forward, doing great things. And when we just look at today and try to explain how today is, this sentence from the Alice in Wonderland encompasses that very nicely. The Queen of Hearts tells to Alice, "My dear, here we must run as fast as we can just to stay in place. And if you wish to go anywhere, you must run twice as fast." And this is exactly how it's happening today. Everything is accelerating. In order to just stay where you are, you need to run. And in order to compete with the other leading companies, universities, countries, you need to run twice as fast. But the world is entering a phase of great economic transition. And I tell to my students, AI is a tool. Just always look to the big picture, what awaits us in the next 10 years. So right now, the cost per megawatt hour of solar panels is lower than any other form of energy. And this is expected to decrease exponentially in the next decade. The way we will produce electricity will change completely, which will solve more or less the cause of most of the military conflicts what we have today. Secondly, lithium-ion battery costs are doing the same exponential decrease. And in the next 10 years, we will be able to generate our energy from sun, and we will be able to store it to use it during the night. And this way, we will solve many problems of the humankind. And at the same time, as it is one of the main themes of the EXPO Dubai, the way we will do mobility will change also completely. We will have electrical cars and the whole industry will transform. Many companies will go down and many will emerge. And the way we think about automotive industry will be completely different. But more important than these, there will be a huge economic disruption due to AI. Because AI permeates everything. We simply want to make things automated. We simply might want to make them intelligent. And I am not a very big proponent of artificial general intelligence. I think one day we will reach that point, but that point is not in the next 5 years or 10 years, and that's a distant dream. But just our capabilities, which have already emerged or which will emerge in the next 5 to 10 years, in autonomous vehicles, computer vision, and natural language processing will create a huge economic disruption. And this economic disruption will be something good for overall, but there will be winners and losers. So which countries will be the winners? Certainly countries with young populations, because you can train those in the new artificial intelligence or data science or whatever field that there will be in the next 10 years, and these countries will be significantly advantaged. Countries that can attract high-quality immigrants, if intelligence is very equally distributed around the world, and if you can figure out a way of bringing that intelligence to your country or company or country will prosper. But since I am an AI person, I like to find always some type of quantifiable metric which tells who will succeed and who will not. And if I put that to the basic mathematics, I think that countries with a high percentage of gross domestic product as education plus R&D spending will be the ones who are the winners. And there will be two tiers of countries and companies as well. One of them is the AI creators, the other ones are AI adopters. For instance, not many countries have contributed to the development of smartphones, but right now it makes the life of all the adopting countries much better. So for AI creators who will benefit mostly from this disruptive economic change, we just need bachelor, master's, and doctoral degrees at research universities. For having AI adopters, we just need bachelor's and master's degrees at teaching institutions, and we just also need short-term training and certification. Now, there is this need, and this need needs to be addressed in a very short time, because we need to just change a significant portion of our workforce for new occupations. And we look to the universities. I took the first university in the world, University of Bologna, from 1088. Universities in general are very conservative and slowly changing organizations. Sometimes among academicians we make fun. We tell them the curriculum changes one funeral at a time. We also tell that changing something in the university is like moving a graveyard. So, and here comes the confession part. While we have these very conservative and slowly changing organizations, I need to teach 20 very smart graduate students next semester robot perception and vision. And I publish 5 papers every year in this field in top journals and conferences, but I don't know how to teach this course. Because new topics are not yet in the books. New topics are in the conference proceedings which has happened 3-4 months ago. I need to go through that information, understand how the field is evolving, and teach this to the kids such that they can just also use them productively in their working lives. It's a huge challenge. And I always thought, what would address that challenge? But when I look at the universities, we just have this research university and a dichotomy emerging in these research universities. We want to separate the teaching faculty members from the research faculty members because this is a very seemingly rational division of labor, because teaching track faculty members will do the teaching, while the research faculty members work on obtaining funding and conducting scientific research, maximizing the scholastic output of that university. In general, our research-intensive faculty members see teaching as a waste of time. However, for any rapidly changing technological field, such as artificial intelligence, this is very problematic. Because the only way to stay up to date is to conduct active research, because the fields are moving very fast. And teaching track faculty, if they don't conduct research, then they will become obsolete in a very short time. So this is one of the dilemmas of the universities and faculty members. Here, either I can teach these young individuals, one of them sitting here, the bivariate normal distribution, and two of them indeed, or I can go to the laboratory and create the new generation of robotic devices which work with AI and publish very good papers or make patents and then just function as a research faculty member. This is a big problem. So how can we reconcile these two concepts and create the workforce of AI for the future? It also brings us back to the past. This is the workshop of an maestro from most probably Venice or Napoli in the Renaissance era. And indeed, this resonates with me most. This should be more or less our educational environment. Student-centered, project-based, apprentice-master relation with research-active faculty members. So in other words, the modern equivalent of this is the research laboratory or research institute. So the AI education for the AI creators must happen in research institutes. But then we can create research institute by themselves and they can exist in isolation and we will solve the problem of AI education. And my analytical mind tells that maybe this is a good solution, but then I just come to the next point. Look, the Renaissance man was not the technical man. He was a man who was a polymath. He was a man who knew everything. So, in AI, my data scientist in my research institute talk in the morning to the nutrition scientist from School of Medicine. In the afternoon, they talk to the physicist who just tries to create organic solar cells using AI. The next day, they just talk to someone from economy department. So for these people to succeed in creating AI for those fields, they just need to have this systematic approach and have a holistic understanding of problems. That requires that they need to understand nature. They need to know mathematics because that is the language of science. They need to know how to communicate. They need to be able to work in teams, philosophy and ethics, economics and politics, and last but not least, arts. So this can be provided in a full-scale university which just has research institutes inside which focus on AI-intensive research. And in my opinion, in the future of AI education, these form of institutions will succeed. And before finishing my talk, I would like to touch another point. Yes, here we have seen a very smart banker who trains the individuals because no one trains them for him. And indeed, in very large scale companies, you can afford to create a container of know-how and share that know-how with the new incoming people. But in today's world, most of the companies are very small. There are some AI startups with 3, 4, 5 individuals. And most of them start that way because no one knows whether that idea will work or not. And eventually they grow. So to satisfy the needs of these type of companies or entities or individuals, we just need continuing education in AI and stackable credentials. So therefore, our universities should focus on how to deliver this research experience in these type of programs as well. So these are my opinions on the AI workforce education for the future. Thank you very much.
I hope that you enjoyed the initial statements from our panelists, but now is the time, of course, for the questions and answers. And I would like to exercise my privilege as moderator of the panel to ask the first question. I take my lead from our provost, Provost Adesida, and also the overwhelming presence of women in our audience, in-person audience here today. And I would like to ask you, especially our two professors on the panel, how do you plan to bridge the gender gap in AI? And I understand that this AI is doing well on its own, but I'm talking about the more general problem. And we know that the percentage of women in machine learning is very low. It's like 13, 14%. Even the big companies like Google or Facebook less than 20% of their staff, technical staff, are women. But we also know from various other studies that teams that are diverse, that have women included in them, perform better. They finish the projects on time and typically with a much better quality. We know that AI is, of course, like any other human endeavor, biased by the biases of the people who work in it. And if we have teams that are only consisting of male members, then we're creating products and applications that do not apply for at least half of this work. So I think it's our responsibility as educators to address this gender gap and take active steps to diminish it. So, yep.
Well, actually, that's a very important question, really. When I was in the US, especially the National Science Foundation, that was one of the hardest problems that we had to deal with. And we used multiple modalities and all that stuff. And then this gender discrepancies and all that stuff, sometimes it's actually implicit in the mind of the people. So when they hire, when they do teaching, when they assign roles and responsibilities within colleges, they don't think that they are actually biased, but implicitly they are, in terms of they hiring, like say, provost female or lady as opposed to a man. And things have been changing quite rapidly in the United States, for sometimes good reasons and sometimes for bad reasons. That the Me Too movement has actually brought to front the type of problems that women have faced through the history of humanity, which I'm as the father of a beautiful daughter, I feel very, very pleased that this is happening. And then we're stepping back and looking at all this, what we have done. I think the problem is a little bit of a cultural problem. For example, here in the United Arab Emirates University, we have about 60 or 70% of the students are female. And many of them are brilliant. They are actually, they compete any time and they do a very good job. But sometimes they choose not to go to work and they stay home because they wanted to be raising family and so on and so forth. And that really is something that you can change as a teacher, but the culture has to kind of step in and say, hey, you can do both, because other people did it. In the United States, a lot of, they shared responsibility a bit more there than, let's say, over here. But it's possible to raise a family and be able to be a lead in technology, AI, or whatever your passion is going to be. So I think a little bit of it is culture. And the second thing is the lack of role model. So that's, we would like to have women, instead of waiting for men to make things happen, that women champion their own cause and step up and said, it's time, for us to change and be able to take leadership. When you do that as mothers, as sisters, as friends and all that stuff, and you kind of put those ideas in the mind of new, like young girls, I think that will change. Of course, changes will be slow because humans don't change overnight, but those are the capabilities are the same. I think if you take if you told me you showed me the performance of one student, another one, it's impossible for me to say, oh, this is a performance of a girl, this is of a boy. That is not true. They beat each other up and down all the time. Sometimes some boys are going to be better, sometimes, and so on and so forth. So I don't think it is educational as much as cultural.
Professor Varro.
In Kazakhstan, I think the problem is not as bad as other places. More than half of our researchers and also approximately half of our students in computer science and robotics are female. But the general problem exists in the world, and in my opinion, it is, as Professor Zenati pointed out, cultural. And it is also due to the lack of role models. When we just look at the field of computer science, all of the people we remember are from the garage era of Silicon Valley, and they are all male. And this is right now changing with time. And in future, I guess this problem will not be as serious as today, and it will change in the positive direction. In Nazarbayev University, our students, female students, are academically more successful than the male ones. And I follow the career development of all of them, and their careers are also developing in an excellent pace. Thank you.
Thank you both for your answers. And it's really amusing. I'm receiving now the questions from our Zoom session and the session here. And one of the very first questions is that it's very interesting to see 5 males discussing the gender gap in AI. So, a message and a lesson for all of us. I have a specific question for Dr. Khan. And the question is, your arguments that future AI innovators need to understand humanities and critical thinking are very compelling. Would you also argue that humanities scholars and innovators need to understand AI? Can you propose some initial steps in that direction?
Thanks for that very interesting question, and I think that the question itself sort of answers it. So I definitely agree that we need to have scholars from humanities who can understand and analyze what are the implications of using certain AI systems out in the real world. And increasingly we're seeing, such as I may be misremembering the name, but there is a Future of Humanity Institute at University of Oxford, where this is exactly already taking place. You have experts from humanities looking at what are the biases inherent in large natural language processing systems. How does the Twitter's image cropping algorithm work and prioritize, Caucasian population as compared to the people of color, for example. And these are not issues that were brought forward by the AI researchers or practitioners, but rather, by the experts in humanities. So I definitely think that needs to happen. In fact, it's already happening. Mm-hmm. This needs to happen a bit more.
There is a follow-up question on that, and that goes back to our professors. Considering that we talk about AI everywhere these days, right? What do you think will be the curricular impact on other fields of AI?
An example I use all the time. 10 years ago, spreadsheets and Word documents, all that stuff are usually used by people who are computer science, but that now, if you don't know how to deal with spreadsheets or email or any of this technology that is put in your laptop, you're not going to be able to be functional properly. Think of AI as that. I mean, for me, when you say AI and humanities, AI does not belong to computer science or does not belong to robotics. AI is a tool. AI is a way for you to be able to solve problems faster, most of the time, because our brains work slow, and then hopefully more efficiently if somehow we get to the general AI that he talked about. I'm not sure. I agree with you. I'm not sure where we're going to get there, but I think the current AI does not give us that opportunity to do that. So AI does not belong in one place. AI is a way of thinking, is a different paradigm than we're used to, where you actually solve problems slowly and then modeling them and blah, blah, blah. In many cases, data science and AI is changing that, changing the way we do think about problems. So for me, it's not about whether humanities use the AI or people from the AI side become fluent with the humanities. There is no choice. It has to be done that way, because AI is a double-cutting sword, so to speak. You can use it for good, but you can use it for bad. A lot of computer scientists say, we create AI and it's up to the policymaker and blah, blah, blah to make a decision how to use it. No, because sometimes the genie gets out of the bottle and then you can't stop it anymore. It has to be intertwined. That thinking has to be the same, okay? The banker, when he brought the example, he had two paths. He had bankers, experts, and then AI bankers or something like that. I think a good question would be, which one is better? The experts that know about banking or the bankers that became expert in AI? And I think for me, that's a financially expensive endeavor for you. Because if we follow the structure that I said, we will train them for you. Because we are educators in essence. We know how to teach. And furthermore, they get 4 years. You see, it's not a minor. They don't take this and a minor. It's intertwined. It's going together. So all our courses, even when we teach Python, we teach how we code in Python, and the labs will be in the domain. They do Python using libraries in Python to solve business intelligence problem. But they have 4 years to assimilate that material. And then when you hire them, it's going to cost you less money, obviously, because they're not bankers. But if you hire them, they're going to hit the ground running. You don't have to spend years, or maybe short duration, to be able to do that. And finally, they would have the fundamentals to keep up with the field. They will not learn skills, those skills of now in the field. They will learn something that will actually prepare them to understand AI as it moves forward. Okay, so that's in a way that you and I agree that we need to have the confluence of the two together. The modality is a little bit different in that sense. So that's what I think.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Continuing with the questions on banking, our audience is interested, Barzan, to learn who are the people you are displacing.
Not displacing, actually, per se. I would say those people are doing more valuable tasks right now. For example, the call center. We are automating the call center. We are automating the communication with the client, and our bots. Actually, by the way, like our bots are talking with the client and trying to solve the problem without the human interaction. And what our call center managers do is that they call the client and ask like, how are you doing? And they have more time to speak with each client, which increases the loyalty of our clients to our enterprise. So we are not displacing them, but we are basically forcing them to learn new skills and give the value to our company in a different way.
Thank you. We have a practical question. An individual from the audience is saying, I am writing my PhD dissertation regarding AI in law enforcement, and it involves legal and managerial aspects. What risks do you see in applying AI in law enforcement? I don't know who from the panel wants to pick that up. Please, go ahead.
So right now we have excellent machine learning models. One of them is the general purpose transformer. It's extremely advanced. It has processed the whole amount of text which has been created by the humankind until now. And it can create realistic text. What it has written, you cannot say whether it was written by a human being or by the AI. But of course, people call this not general artificial intelligence. In our field, we call this software as a stochastic parrot. So it basically tries to understand the context and is making up some type of text which is plausible, but actually what it is doing some statistical inferences and generating some nice text. So this is somewhat dangerous because AI is open to bias. Whatever data you will feed to the AI will affect the outcome of AI. So therefore, you might just basically process all the case files in your country, and the AI might tell that people coming from this region of the country have a higher probability of committing a crime and assign some type of probability prior to that. So this is dangerous. So therefore, the focus in that research, in my opinion, must be how to ensure to use the data which will prevent bias in the decisions. And this will require lots of data creation, basically synthesizing the data with the help of the experts, which will make this a very costly task.
Thank you. Next question is for Arthur. Since you are preparing products for the marketplace, who is responsible for AI's mistakes?
That's a great question. Well, in our configuration, we are responsible for AI mistakes. What we, however, do is we're very conscious and very clear about what we're trying to do. In our work, we are not trying to replace human thinking or decision-making capability. We're trying to augment human reading capability and knowledge acquisition and decision-making for that matter. So at Causally, we machine read the entirety of academic literature on biomedical research and extract evidence that we comprehend the nature of relationship between different biomedical concepts and generate a knowledge graph out of it. And to this knowledge graph, you can ask very complex questions, right? You can ask, what is the landscape of disease X, treatment landscape of disease X? What are the common side effects of the further interventions? What are the biomarkers of another disease? So what we're trying to do is we're kind of trying to have imagine a colleague who read all the biomedical papers, 30 million plus of them, and remembers them all. And you can ask all these questions to that person, to him or her. So we're trying to be transparent, and we're trying to enable our users to make decisions and see also and be very also clear about the accuracy every time we use machine learning models or symbolic systems. There's always an accuracy gap. None of them are 100% accuracy. This awareness is critical for this purpose.
Okay. Thank you. Quite a large number of our audience are very sensitive to the data privacy issues with respect to AI. And I will try to paraphrase a few of those questions. And let me see. Who owns and who is able to access this data? What are the privacy concerns? Who should be considered responsible if something goes wrong? Something goes wrong now for safeguarding the privacy of the data. Anybody on the panel? Please.
May I ask the question? As a holder of all the transactional data of million people in Kazakhstan, I think like there are few safeguards that you can set up when you are working with the data. The first one, of course, it's a legal one, to make sure that people understand the ramifications that will happen after you share that data. But of course, it's like basically solving the problem afterwards. The second is making sure that people that you working with you and with your data are extremely ethical. And this can be achieved during the interview. And when you are working with them, you can basically understand that. But of course, like there are ways to like basically make sure that the data leak might happen. There will be responsible people for that, obviously. But in that case, like for example, when you're training the models, you are training the AI, what we are trying to do is we are depersonalizing the data. So we are removing the particular person name, his identity, his ID numbers, his documents from it. And we are using that data for training. And on the other hand, we are using artificially generated data, which replicates the real world data. And that data is actually not linked to any person like who is alive. So that way we can set up few safeguards, but as we understand, they are not 100%, but they decrease the probability of privacy issues, as you said.
Let me extend the question beyond just banking. I'm talking about AI in general. We cannot depend as societies, right, on the goodwill and good ethics of Barzan or a company, right? So should there be some regulatory framework?
I do believe
data acquisition, protection, privacy.
Yeah, I do believe there should be a regulatory framework. And in fact, like in some industries, it's already existing. It just has to be augmenting and considering AI things like automated machine learning algorithms, etc. For example, in medicine, your medical data is extremely protected. You cannot like go and I cannot go to any hospital and ask like, what is the sickness of Arthur, for example. So same thing with the banking. We are one of the most regulated industries. The only problem right now is actually regulators who are slow at catching up. The amount of data is generated by our app is not only transactional, for example, in the banking, in the medicine, in the insurance, etc. That we see when people open the app, how much he spends screen time in our app, how he scrolls, like whether we can detect whether he uses left hand or right hand. So all of that is actually not a banking data, but it's the information that we have access to. So we need to make sure that regulators also understand that we have more information that they are aware.
Actually, I would like to say that The problem is actually much, much harder than that. I think what's talked about is how can you protect the data from having people access it if they have no right to access it. I think that's a problem that is difficult. But AI brings a twist to that. I'll give you an example. If I know your DNA, I can say a lot of things about your cousins and their third and fourth and fifth generation, even though they never give me any data whatsoever. That could be used for good reasons. For example, if I look at the DNA of this person, I can link somebody who's suspicious of committing a murder, say if that DNA is there, I can track them down, even though they would not be willing to give their own DNA. I can do a good thing because now I put somebody who committed a crime in jail. But think about the other stuff, that I take your DNA and now you know that he or she is your cousin. And if God forbid you have a problem, that it is very likely that that problem would be in that person as well. So if I'm an insurance company, I probably would not insure that person because it's going to cost me a lot of money, even though there is no, so to speak, information that was stolen from that person. I think those are extremely more complex issue than just protecting the data from access. The same thing for who's going to be responsible where a mistake is committed. I mean, driverless cars is a typical example in there. The car is driving, driverless, there is no driver, and then there's a person is passing, and now you have to make a decision. Should you kill the people in the car or should you kill the passenger in there? I mean, human beings, sometimes we have the capability of doing that. Why? Because we have a conscience of some sort. AI does not have a conscience, and it's going to be many, 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 many years before we reach that. For us to unleash AI and then let it permeate every aspect of our lives without rethinking the whole thing, not by comparison, but in a completely different framework, we're going to have serious problems to deal with. That makes our life a lot harder than actually what it is. I mean, think about this person who cannot get an insurance anymore. And they didn't do anything wrong. They didn't give anything to them, basically. They just got it because AI and the data science progress has made it possible for me to infer things based on what I see in your dissecting or sequencing your DNA of some sort.
Well, speaking of which, we have an interesting question. In your opinion, when will AI-based unmanned vehicles function in full, not demo version?
When would that happen?
Yes.
Actually, a lot of people think the driverless car is a difficult problem. It's actually not a very difficult problem. There's a lot more difficult problem. There are problems, say, system 1 and system 2. System 1 problem is something that a human being can answer quickly. System 2 problems, the difficulty of the problem is that it take a lot of time for you to come to an answer. Those are the problems that AI cannot solve very well right now. Some of the problem where everything is systematic, more or less, could be solved easily. When would be the car fully driverless, so to speak? I think it is a possibility. I think it will be done, but it will require a complete rethinking about the highways and how we drive. For example, airplanes, they are driverless now, right? I mean, there are no pilots in there, but there is restriction. Every plane, at a certain altitude in a certain direction. If you do the same thing for the highways, we can have that. Actually, it's going to be extremely easy to control and will be very, very safe because we design it to be not intersecting. Look at the metros underground. They behave that way to a certain extent. The problem is if you're going to have cars that behave like the cars today, that will be extremely difficult to achieve.
Okay. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Next question is very interesting also. Human learning and its accomplishments have benefited from serendipity. Pasteur, coffee conversations, transdisciplinarity, etc. Is there potential for AI to achieve this typically human characteristic? That's a tough question. I can see the panel is standing. Yes.
All right, let me give the word to Arthur.
Thank you.
It's the Japanese style.
I would, to be honest, I think it's a great question. To be honest, going towards the direction of the AGI and artificial general intelligence and transcending human capabilities, there would be a question: why would we measure them towards ourselves, right? Which is a very common trait for us. We're building the very anthropomorphic world for our own selves. The entire perception of consciousness and the world and the nature is anthropomorphic. It's human-centric. What I observed, a very interesting trend about the ethics in AI as AI progresses further, is that it brings us back to philosophy in a way. If there was a Gartner report about when philosophy was trending, it was certainly trending a lot in the past before the digital age explosion. I think then we started looking at our phones and forgot about philosophy a little bit. But it's really bringing it back. It's again making us question these things. Is what if the conscious ones were not the two-legged humans, but bats, as in one of the epic 1984 or 1982 essays. So to your question, unfortunately, I don't know the answer, but I think it's very much rightfully to think that AGI would be trans or post-human or completely different necessarily, right? In its ultimate form. But as long as we are before that point and we are training it in our own vision, all our problems and biases today would just be amplified. And some of the good features as well would be amplified for that matter too, right?
Thank you.
All right, I am a practical person, so therefore I will answer this question from a practical perspective. So why do we learn better when we drink coffee with someone rather than we just read a book? Because that person asks questions which we are not able to ask to ourselves. So in many cases, the ability to ask a question is much more important than to find a solution. And in my opinion, coffee facilitates that over there. And when we look at the artificial intelligence today, we have some set of algorithms, such as the generative adversarial neural networks, which is creating some type of competitive game where we just have a generator and some type of discriminator, and they are asking each other questions and answers, and it just basically learns how to create a new form of objects, devices, etc. So in that context, this game theoretic question answering competitive scheme in some forms works in AI already, and in future I guess this will just accelerate further and will also encompass scenarios as you have described in which AI drinks coffee with the other AI.
Okay, and since we have you on the microphone, there's a very specific question. What is the biggest challenge ESI faces today?
All right, in front of the provost, should I answer this question?
Yes.
More money.
Look, I just have shown you the AI servers, which are very expensive devices. And in order to conduct AI research today, you need many of those. So as of now, I can state that my institute could have done much more impactful research if I would have more computational resources. And this is a big problem because the amount of computation we need to do in order to make an epsilon of improvement in the performance of an AI algorithm is increasing exponentially. So the cost of conducting AI research is also increasing very fast. We need to come up with new form of algorithms, more efficient training algorithms, and solve this problem. But if you ask me my biggest problem, that is as of now computational power. But I can just kind of make this a very long list of secondary problems.
But we can project this at a different level. If the major issue is resources, along with human capital, of course, what will be the outcome of the race between the haves and the have-nots?
Can you elaborate?
We say that advances in AI, I'm using the ESI example to project on a more global scale. And we are saying that AI advances depend on investment, serious investment, and of course the presence of human capital.
Yes.
That puts societies that are not well-resourced at a disadvantage.
Certainly.
What can they do?
They can be AI adopters and secondary benefactors of this transition, as it has been in most of the other transitions. For instance, United States has created the internet and reaped the benefits of that technology with all the big tech companies right now today being from United States. However, me as a young kid from Turkey enjoyed using the Gopher in 1994 and internet as well. So we have, as AI internet adopters, benefited from that technology. These type of countries which do not have the resources or the willingness to invest in these technologies, either in the form of education or R&D, will also benefit at a lesser level as the adopters of these technologies.
I have kept one. Yes, I have kept one question for last because we have a very long session already, and I would like to address it to each one of you in sequence. Our audience member is saying, why is AI in higher education lagging other areas of AI applications? What needs to be done to make AI more relevant to teaching and learning in higher education?
Okay, so I'm not sure I quite understand the question. So why is AI
applications lagging in higher education?
Oh, so use of AI for
use
education.
Use of AI in higher education is lagging other applications of AI.
Absolutely. So I would say that I wouldn't say lagging. Usually what we do in many ways, including in AI, I think of AI as if like we want to create something that would replace a man or replace a human being, so to speak, right? We try to say you have to think like a person, have conscience like a human being, do that stuff. But there is easier way to replicate a man than just to spend billions and billions of dollars on doing AI. I mean, we replicate people every day. I think sometimes the goal is not very well defined with respect to what we'd like to achieve with the technology or whatever tool, whatever we have. AI is good for education to some extent, right? And then AI is also, technology is cumbersome in the sense that interaction with the students when you speak to them is very natural, right? You can talk, the students can say something, maybe something interrupt you and blah, blah, blah. We're not at the point where are we defining the technology that will allow us to do that. I mean, he likes a lot about philosophy and all that stuff. When I was at Pittsburgh, I'm going to finish with this quickly. I was trying to build a school in the University of Pittsburgh. Actually, it exists right now, School of Computing and Informatics. And we invited many people to teach us how we build the school. One of them was the previous chancellor of AI. And he was exactly asked the type of question, say, one of the teachers, she was actually a teacher of English, and she said, students read like this 2 pages from Wikipedia or the first page from the book, and they say, hey, I read the book, I know the book. And she said, if you don't read the last page of Mice and Men, you have never read the book again. So she was asking him, how can I fight the student and make him don't go to Wikipedia, the internet and all that stuff and try to learn by yourself? And he said Aristotle and then Socrates and all these people had the same problem because he was Socrates was teaching his student by teaching them the art of dialoguing so that the dialogue does not collapse into a fight. And then by that process, they will learn. So if I'm dialoguing with you, I discover some of the ideas I didn't know, and then we can increase our knowledge that way. So one of his disciples approached him and said, why don't you write a book to teach people how to do that? And he said, book don't talk to me. So he never wanted to write the book. So what his disciple did, he wrote a book in the form of a dialogue. So when you read the book, actually as if like you're speaking with somebody, I think we have the same, I would say, challenge. How can you use IT to help us to educate people without having IT become the reason for why people don't get educated because they use the cheating, the quick way, the lack of focus, and then all that stuff to do these things. I think it's not the IT problem; it's us finding a way to use it the most effective way. Thank you.
I think Professor covered it very well already, but proctoring is something that we've seen even as a graduate student. I used to assist with teaching courses and evaluating exams, and back then we had access to Authenticate and other such tools which could help you figure out if students try to game the system. And that was one application of machine learning that was already being used in higher education. And there are other interestingly emerging applications. For example, there are apps there now that try to track the mental well-being of students as they go through the semesters, which can provide an additional signal to the teachers on, just how the class is feeling, and if there's something that they can do about it. Other than that, with COVID, we had increasingly seen that students now had to take exams and classes at home. So there are systems that can track the movement of a cursor to try to understand whether a student is actually paying attention to the classroom or not. There are solutions for remote proctoring and so on. So I think these are among the applications that we're going to see, among many others, come up, AI-driven in higher education.
I think this question is even greater amplified if you would compare it to healthcare, right? In healthcare and biomedical research, there's a gigantic emerging area of precision medicine, right? We used to create a pill and give it to everybody. But the physiology and genetic composition of people, of course, create a lot of individualities in the perception and reaction to the drugs. A lot is changing over time, quite fast in that area. However, in education, fundamentally, historically, it's quite resistant to change. We create curriculum and we teach it to classrooms of hundreds and hundreds of people, and we do it repetitively, semester to semester. Is it functional? Absolutely, yes. So evidently, it works great. Is it optimal, or is it inefficient and suboptimal enough to change it? I guess that's the question, right? And then there are many other factors, how the investment and priorities are brought in by the institutions, by governments, and we all know that research money flow is quite convoluted, is heavily regulated, and there is less, definitely, industry-wise agenda to disrupt education, right? We want to disrupt healthcare in a good way, transform healthcare, biomedical research, travel, and many others. But in education, there's not sufficient today market appeal and an agenda that is centralized to say, look, the education needs to really transform significantly, fundamentally. And that in its turn lacks a lot of talented problem solvers for trying to build something there and change it. Those are just a few ideas on the great question I had. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to speak about that matter in a bit more positive way. I worked for a couple of years as an instructor in Kuwait, actually, across the bay here. What I think is that AI is already helping educators to teach better. And it's not doing it in an obvious way, like there is a robot in front of me teaching me something, but the AI and like the data science models, etc., they are taking the annoying part of my job. For me personally, it was the grading. I hated it. And I had some code written that was grading the students' work, and I had more time to speak with the students and to talk. As you said, like the talking is the best way of learning, and I had more of that. And I was less tired, so I had more performance basically in that way. So I think AI is changing, but it's not in an obvious way that we think.
All right, last but not least, I think, as I have pointed out in my talk, education is a very conservative business because it is also a reputation-based business. It takes hundreds of years sometimes to establish the reputation of a university, and one single mistake can make it go away. So if the stakes are so high, why would the educational institutions take that risk? So this just brings us another important point. You have mentioned the countries which do not have the resources. Maybe they should focus on the application of AI in education such that they can deliver higher quality education to bigger masses, and that will be their competitive advantage. Because I don't think that Harvard will take it a huge risk to deliver the courses by an AI instructor, while they can just deliver it by the best experts of the field. And therefore, maybe this is an area where this can be applied in countries with lesser resources, and that would be their competitive advantage.
I would also like to thank our audience, especially the in-person audience, for their patience. This has been a very long session. And without further ado, I would like to invite again our Provost, Provost Adesida, to say the closing words.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank everybody on the stage. And Atakan, did you plant somebody over there asking you the question, what is limiting AI?
Maybe.
Thank you indeed. I think you found to our audience here. Thank you very much. Also to our audience online. I hope you've been able to stay as long as we've been able to stay here. You've learned a couple of things on AI. AI is intensive. It is multidisciplinary because there are many things that are packaged under what is called AI. It has tremendous application across many different fields. It's becoming much like an engine, an infrastructure of life, essentially. It's an infrastructure of life. So we have to look at it that way. And it applies to so many areas, so many domains, banking. I'm glad that that you're not firing people through AI, making them do something differently. And the work of Professor Zinati in terms of designing a new curriculum. Really, I would like to come and share some of those with you and see how we can work together in this area. These are completely, thank you very much. Thank you again. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody online from various countries. I think you've learned a little bit about AI. And above all, I hope about Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan. So thank you very much and have a good evening. Thank you.